Okay, so how are you?
I'm doing great. How
Good.
about yourself?
Uh, it's the day-to-day thing, one day to the next.
Right.
So, will you please tell us your name and tell us anything you could share with us to help us get to know you a little bit better?
Sure. I'm Brandon Winford. I'm a associate professor of history at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. I am originally from a place called Mooresville, North Carolina. Actually, one of the places where NASCAR has a stronghold. And I went to school in North Carolina, a graduate of North Carolina Central University in Durham. Received my PhD at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. My kind of recent tagline is that I'm a author, historian, and weekend golfer. So anybody who knows me knows that I am I love playing golf, avid golfer, and that's actually one of my spaces where I go to get released from a lot of the stresses of life.
Mhm.
On the golf course is it's nature. It's you're out and about. So that kind of keeps me gets me back to a sort of calm place, grounding and trying to really understand any given moment, anything that's happening in my life. And so that's one thing that anybody who knows me, people who are gonna get to know me, know that I play a lot of golf. Haven't been able to more recently. Just kind of started back going to the range and venturing back out, but it's been difficult trying to knowing that that's part of my the space that I that brings me calmness, and not being able to sort of access it has been a challenge. But I'm good,
So, I'm going to tear apart all three of the things you said you were. So, first, tell us what do you teach at UT, and why do you teach that?
So I teach late 19th and 20th century African American history, United States history, Southern U.S. history, particularly with focuses on the history of the Civil Rights Movement, African American business history, and generally this period in the United States, really the first half of the 20th century, but also sort of this post-war World War II period. My teaching interests really stem from my general interest in growing up, interest in biography, African American biographies. Uh, that was really one of the few genres that I was really interested in reading growing up, and found a lot of inspirational or inspiration from just reading about people's lives. And so I'm really interested in people's individual lives, collective biographies, and things of that nature. And so that really sort of sparked my interest in history, and African American history in particular. Really sort of understanding, my own connection to history, my own history, is really why I sort of got into doing what I do. My interest in I really didn't start out wanting to research and write about civil rights history necessarily, but once I came to the particular topic, I had to do civil rights history. I was more interested actually in sort of early 20th century African American history, but my sort of research interest really now really sort of expands the post emancipation period of African American history.
Yeah.
I'm just really interested and nosy about people's lives.
Yeah.
Is really sort of the biggest interest there.
Yeah. Okay. And so the second thing you said is you are an author. So can you tell us a little bit about your book?
Sure. My first book is John Hervey Wheeler, Black Banking and the Economic Struggle for Civil Rights. It's published through the University Press of Kentucky. And the book really explores the public life of banker and lawyer John Hervey Wheeler, who was based in Durham, North Carolina, in one of the United States' most well-known Black Wall Streets. He was president of Mechanics and Farmers Bank in Durham, one of the largest Black-owned banks in the United States. And so it really, as a public biography, it really explores his involvement as a Black businessman in the civil rights movement. I like to look at him and refer to him as a sort of Black business activist, really trying to understand why, as a Black businessman, aside from him being African American, he would be interested in the struggle for civil rights. And so the book really explores the ways in which he sought to fulfill the larger goals and objectives of the civil rights movement, him understanding that the broader goals of civil rights, in part, or a central focus, was about economic rights for African Americans, Black economic empowerment. And he understood and sought to fulfill the goals of Black economic empowerment through civil rights. In other words, he believed that African Americans could not have the full extent of democracy and citizenship, civil rights, and Black economic power if they didn't have access to all their full citizenship rights. And so the book really delves into his struggle for Black educational equality. It looks at his fight for African-American public accommodations for African Americans, and particularly recreational rights for African Americans, which he believed were extremely important for this idea of effective citizenship, this idea of African Americans, again, being able to take full advantage of American society. And leisure and recreation was as much a part of that, and as important as any other core sort of civil rights. It also deals with the fight for equal employment opportunity, voting rights, and politics in North Carolina and the South more generally. His engagement with presidential administrations of John Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson, his fight for, or his anti-poverty work in North Carolina and the South. And so, again, each chapter in the book really sort of tries to deal with one aspect of his fight for civil rights, ultimately understanding that all of what he was fighting for him was about reaching some sort of Black economic wherewithal for African Americans. Ultimately, it was about Black economic empowerment as a pathway to this larger notion of New South prosperity. The ways in which African Americans, if they had Black economic power, they would then have the wherewithal to contribute to regional prosperity in the face of post-war prosperity after the end of World War II, going into the 1960s, and increasingly an age of industrialization and technological innovation. He believed that African Americans had to have some role in that. And so the book really sort of explores his public activism and really sort of looking at not only just his involvement, but what he used to engage all of those issues, his institutional and organizational involvement, his political engagement, and his organizational work with organizations like the Civil Rights Organization, the Durham Committee on Negro Affairs, which was a civil rights organization that he chaired from 1957 to 1978, still in existence in Durham. His institutional work with the Mechanics Farmers Bank, the ways in which he used the bank to help facilitate things like Black home ownership, other kinds of economic investment opportunities for African Americans, and his political influence in North Carolina was really huge during this mid-20th century South and this large struggle for civil rights on the part of African Americans.
Okay, and the book is available on Amazon?
The book is available through Amazon, any of your online retailers. It's also available through the University Press of Kentucky's website. And I should note that recently the book is a co-winner of the 2020 Lillian E. Smith Book Award, which really sort of focuses on Southern writers or Southern works that really sort of address the issues of social justice in the South in particular. And so really excited to have received that honor.
Well, congratulations. I'm very glad to hear it.
Thank you.
And we're going to come back to that in a minute,
Okay.
but I want to talk about golf. So I'm an avid golfer too. I used to be. I'm on my third rotator cuff surgery on my right hand, and I'm I'm a right-handed person, so I haven't been on a golf course in a while. But one of the things on my bucket list was to see Tiger Woods play at Augusta, and I was able to do that in 2014. It was the most phenomenal experience I ever had. I was about as far as I am from him as we were when we went to lunch the last time you were here. I could literally reach out and touch him. That's how close I was to him. And while I enjoyed playing golf, I was always bothered by golf, because like I have like this history of Black men as caddies and these things, and so I'm a huge Tiger Woods fan. He's everything to me. I hated the way they tried to destroy him, but I mean, like, he broke records that white people thought only they could do. Like, only white people could play golf. So why did golf become a habit for you? What drew you to it, and why do you still enjoy it?
So I grew up playing golf. My dad is the biggest reason why I play golf. He played a lot of golf growing up, golf and fishing, and he introduced me to the game. And so I grew up. I have 2 younger brothers, have 2 sisters also, but we all grew up playing golf, and so it's always been a part of my involvement in athletics, is playing golf. And then, as you grow up, certain sports you kind of, can't play anymore if you don't keep up with it. And golf is one of those sports that you can play long term. And I also played some at North Carolina Central University. We were weekend golfers, and so that was a way for me to, get some free golf. I couldn't play on the golf team now because it's Division I sport now. So I also played for North Carolina Central, and just sort of fell in love with the game of golf. Also, was coming up when Tiger Woods hit the scene. So the one of the biggest moments was when he won his first Masters championship. That was a huge moment, and really an inspiring moment for someone who, grew up playing golf. And so I grew up knowing that African Americans played golf. So Tiger Woods wasn't anything new.
Right.
And so I understood from that standpoint, how much we played golf. And then it was not until college, really, though, that I really began to sort of explore the history of African Americans in golf. And so knowing about Charlie Sifford in Charlotte, North Carolina, and knowing about the United Golfers Association, the Black counterpart to the PGA, African Americans had their own golf association, just like they had organizations, professional organizations, the tennis associations, things of that nature. And so really sort of began to sort of understand and connect that history. And so it came sort of full circle, me being a historian, understanding, playing golf, but also understanding that larger history is an amazing history. The decades and decades of professional African American golfers, and that history, an amazing history. It's a good book that just came out recently, the University of North Carolina Press. It's called "A Game of Privilege: A History of African Americans in Golf." Really, really well researched, really comprehensive history of African Americans in golf. And of course, there are a lot of others. The authors escape me, but there are a number of other books on the history of African Americans in golf. And some of my writing I haven't been able to sort of work through is about history of golf in North Carolina. There's some really good stuff. There's actually a good article, the North Carolina Historical Review on the history of golf in North Carolina. So playing golf and just having that and just being a historian really sort of reinforces how I understand the game and reinforces my experience, right? When you think about sort of the marketplace and the golfer as a consumer, when we go out to the golf courses, some of the challenges, some of the problems with the game of golf when you venture out in sort of this broader marketplace.
Yeah. And that's really where I was going, because there've been, I think every sport there is, there's always been Black and brown people playing, right. But we only recognize when white people achieve and white people play, so, there are these records that Tiger has broken, and, they're sitting on the edge of fear that he's going to break the last record that's out there. And that most of the caddies and people out there were Black. Like, so when I went to Augusta, and I was just so surprised. I mean, it's not like it's this beautiful, beautiful place, it's not like it's like you think about going to some lush place, it's a gravel parking lot, the greens are beautiful, but I mean, they got these kind of cabin-like places where you can go buy clothes, you can go, get food and stuff like that, but that you could still see the remnants of where they didn't want Black people. They were still there. I think Tiger's ability to play golf so well started bringing some of those barriers down. And even in Pinehurst here in North Carolina, where it was, specific that Black people could not play. Whereas in Durham, if you went to Central, the Hillendale golf course, anybody can go play there, but even that had its challenges. So, it's like, when you mentioned tennis, like, so we had Arthur Ashe long before we had Serena Williams and all these other people, but those things weren't recognized or, really.
Thea Gibson, yeah.
Right. Before we get to the point where we recognize that Black people have been great for a long, long time and a lot of different things, not just we sing and dance and play sports, but we can do a lot of things and we've done really well, which brings me to my question. Do you think that because of the diversity of African Americans in their education, their mental, their physical, their overall ability to survive has made us a threat, which brought to us George Floyd's death, I'm sorry.
Well, wherever we are, and I go back to sort of this idea of the consumer marketplace, which scholars have been writing about. Wherever we are in the consumer marketplace, we're a threat. We're a threat before we open our mouth, before we enter the store, and when we enter the venues, and our performance is always a threat because we're there, right? And so on that basis, yes, we are threats, not because of us, but because how the world views and the expectations, the preconceived notions it places on us. Yeah, so we're always threats, and I think the challenge is the challenge is how do we get all of those other entities that are part of reinforcing this idea that we are the threat. How do you get them to rethink and reconsider how they view us in those spaces? And on the one hand, just to sort of keep it to thinking about sports is one of those places. If it's done in the right context, we may not be seen as a threat by the people who are observing us, although we're competition to our opponents.
Right.
And so, and we go into different spaces that is different, outside of that context. So when we're playing golf, when we're playing, tennis and other kinds of sporting activities, we are no longer the folks who are being observed. We are participating in a part of it. We're a part of society. And so as much as we're seen as a threat, we're also, there are also all these kinds of barriers that keep us from simply existing and living and taking full advantage of those spaces as African Americans, right? Whether it's a department store, whether it's on the golf course, whether it's in a beauty healthcare store, whether it's on an excursion, a wine excursion, or I remember the instance of the African American women on a wine excursion, right? And so,
or whether it's in a university or
at a university, especially
wherever you are,
wherever we are, I think we're a perceived threat.
Right.
No matter what you look like, no matter how you're dressed. Right. And I think it's important for us to understand that, because that's also important for how we try to express, articulate, and explain the experiences of African Americans more generally, right? Is not if you do this in a certain way, if you dress in a certain way, that experience is going to be better. It's not. And I think as we're sort of explaining and articulating that experience, we have to be mindful of the ways in which we can reinforce those ideas if we're not careful.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to go back to your book for a minute to talk about wealth. And one of the interesting things that I heard at a talk yesterday, the woman said health, environmental, and racial justice are tied together like a knot, like they belong together, right? So, and there's a great article. It was written, I think it was written in 2014. I don't remember when it was written, and I'll send you a copy if you're interested in it. But it talked about how Black and brown people had PTSD, and encoded on our DNA is the history of slavery and all of that it meant. So, as we are looking at COVID right now, it's affecting the Black and brown communities more because we have more chronic health illnesses. Right. What's the correlation between wealth, health, and justice?
So there are a number of things. When we think of, so let me just say that I think housing is an important aspect of our experience and the ways and the extent to which we've been able to access the fullest extent of American society purports to offer. And so I think where we live is important in terms of where we're able to work, where we're able to go to school, the resources that we have in or around our communities. When we're talking about sort of access to grocery stores, we're talking about access to economic resources, access to parks and playgrounds and things of that nature. And so access to, again, job opportunities. I think where we live and where we have access to housing has had a huge impact on things like our health, environmental, things like sort of the environment and racial justice. Look at the experience of John Wheeler. Part of his concerns, right, and sort of his struggle for civil rights was that, again, where one lived determined their success in a society, right? And so, healthcare is always been sort of very much a part of that, and thinking through and sort of some of those challenges. We cannot separate health, environment from social justice. All of these things, and that's part of the, I guess, sort of thinking about sort of larger struggle for civil rights, and particularly when thinking about sort of economic rights, you can't have one without the other, right? Part of our long-term fight has been we need access to all of those citizenship rights and civil rights at one and the same, right? It's not that we needed one and then we'll work toward it. We needed all of them at one and the same in order for us to really sort of live and thrive in this country, in this society. Yeah. John Wheeler, is a really interesting figure in that he was also involved in this sort of fight for healthcare, right? We think about sort of this integrated, the coming of integration. And we think about the Black hospital in a place like Durham, the white hospital in a place like Durham. When it came to the conversations around integration, his thoughts and his questions were, what's going to happen to the Black doctor who was a Harvard graduate and superintendent of the Black hospital when those institutions integrated? Right. Was he going to be the superintendent of the integrated institution because he was a Harvard graduate? The answer is no. What's going to happen to those nurses and what we're going to happen to some of those doctors and some of those employees? Also, were Black doctors and nurses going to have full access to all of the patients? Were Black patients going to receive the fullest extent of the care that they deserve? And so all of these questions of, access and in what most helps us live from day to day have always sort of been central to this sort of struggle for civil rights and citizenship. And it's no different when we look at sort of this, the history that I sort of work on with John Wheeler. Yeah. And so that's partly how I'm sort of thinking about that conversation in terms of the sort of connection between health, environment, and racial justice. And feel free to ask some follow-up questions if you want me to sort of go in a particular direction.
We only have about 5 minutes, and I just have one question for you. I'm going to give you some time so you can say whatever you want to say. But what was your experience when you came to Duke? Why did you come to Duke, and what did you experience when you came to Duke to do is talk about your book and your work?
So, well, let me say that I was contacted. I think it was Professor Joseph. Is it Blocher?
Blocher.
Blocher. I don't know how I messed his name up. So I was able to speak to a group of his students and
Lee Reiner's too. So I think it was Lee Reiner's I connected you to first.
Well, yeah, Lee Reiner, he invited me for the global
global his GFMC.
Yeah. The Blocher. I was able to speak. Blocher. I'm sorry. I was able to speak to his students who were taking a course on urban history, and the focus was on Durham. So I had an opportunity to talk with his students in a seminar and go around the room and see what they were working on, and was able to provide some suggestions for research, given my own background in primary research on Durham. And a few students, African-American students, contacted me, and I was able to share some resources, and they wrote some really amazing papers dealing with African-American education in Durham. And so I was excited about that class that's being taught on Durham in particular. And so my experiences, I should say that my experiences at Duke have always been sort of, as it relates to doing research, going to the Rubenstein Library and sort of understanding that history. I believe that, the planning for that event was done well. I was excited that some of the publicity for that event, I guess I was able to share on a radio show that I was on. And so we had people from the community come, so I was really excited about that. Really just excited to be able to really sort of talk about race, capitalism, and law at a place like Duke that has been so central to the history of race, law, capitalism in the city of Durham, Duke University being one of the largest employers. And so I was really, really sort of excited and happy with that particular experience. And some of the people
you
came out, some of the students.
You could say thank you now.
Oh yeah. Well, let me not forget that.
I'm just kidding.
No. I really do. I really do appreciate you connecting me with Lee Reiner. Reiner. And let me say this, so people will listen. If Rochelle reaches out to you, say yes. And if you don't say yes, she's going to continue to be persistent. And I appreciate that, because so often folks who are in your position and in my position, we oftentimes are looking upward to where we're trying to go. And sometimes we're not looking and identifying younger folks who are working in different areas and connecting them to those kinds of institutions and to have those kinds of opportunities. So I really, really appreciate that. And that's one of the things that.
I was really just kidding you. I was just kidding.
Oh, I know, but I'm as serious as I can be about that, because one of my goals in terms of what I do as an academic, as a scholar, as a person, is sometimes we're trying to be a part of groups and things like that, and sometimes we don't take time to recognize that we already have our own network, and it's important for us to sort of tap into our own network's orbit, but also to put folks who are trying to do and be what we are, to put them in contact with those networks, so that they'll have similar opportunities, or even a better opportunities than what we had. And so I think I say all that to say I really sort of appreciate this conversation, this focus on diversity, and really sort of understanding diversity as more than just having a conversation. One of the things that I'm really sort of concerned about now is that, it's not good enough for us to just have these conversations, but what are some of the actionable goals can we bring before we have these conversations? What are some of the commitments do we have before we even have these conversations, so that when we have these conversations, we can build upon our commitments, our specific goals that we already have in mind. And so I really sort of think that's really important to understand where do we go from having these conversations. And I think what you're doing and the ways in which you connect people is part of how we do that. It doesn't have to take a long-term strategic planning and initiative necessarily to reach our objectives. It just takes linking with people, putting them in contact with folks who that they can benefit, and there can be sort of a reciprocal relationship there. I think that's really important.
I think that if I have any good quality in life, it is that I am a connector. I connect somebody to somebody almost every single day. And
Right.
I was thinking about how I met you. You had come to the Black Communities conference, and when I heard you talk, I just knew there was a space for that at Duke. There was a place where you could bring what you were saying to Duke. So I was very glad you could come. And what I heard, it was overall success. I think I was mired in my own work at Duke. I didn't get a chance to see you, but I was really glad. I heard it was really, really done well, and people got a lot out of it.
And I should also say that part of as an author, when you publish works, is libraries will purchase the books and people will bring you, and so part of that conversation was getting them to contact the library, make sure they had copies of the book, but also them having books and copies on hand and purchasing copies. And so I think that's important when authors come give talks. How are we sort of supporting the work that they're doing, particularly if that work is on the city that the institution is located in?
Yeah.
And we could have some other conversations about, why my work isn't available in certain bookstores in Durham. And, part of it is the cost of it, but, I think it's important, for the work to be available locally, right? And, so some challenges there, which
I think it will be good. I mean, we can't do it right now in this current climate, is for you to have a closer relationship with the National BALSA organization, which is Black Law Students Association, and then the Duke and some of the others, UNC and all those others, because I think that a lot of what's missing for Black people is that resource that I can go to that looks like me, that can help me, and although you may not be a lawyer, if I'm interested in civil or racial justice or whatever it is, I've got a foundation with a historian, and we have a beautiful historian at Duke. Her name is Stavola Glimp. I don't know if you got to meet her.
Yeah, well, I've had her to do our annual African American History lecture at the University of Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, just absolutely phenomenal. She's great to the law students. She's just such a phenomenal person. But I don't know.
Giant historian.
Really, really so much so. And she connects with the law students. She's able to talk to them about various things. So I'm very, very glad that she's there. But I think they need to have more. Having a Black woman is a phenomenal thing. That's a historian like Tavola is. I mean, she's amazing. She's simply phenomenal. But having Black men, that students can see, even going, below law school, but to graduate programs, undergraduates, to elementary schools, to high schools, because where is my role model? Where's the person that helps me be who I am? And I never had one. I did not have, a mentor or role model. I never saw any Black people in computers because I started out in the 70s. And I mean, it was really a white male dominated society. So I think that people like you are very necessary to go into all kinds of venues so that they can see I can be this. Sort of like the President Obama thing, that I can be this. Anybody can be the president. And you can see that by the current president, that anybody can be the president, but specifically that Black kids can be, brown kids can be the president too. So thank you so much for doing this. We are going to do it again, probably not until August or
definitely.
September. but we will do it again. And I'm so good to see you, and I'm glad things are well. And I'm going to make a couple more connections for you. I probably won't do it this week, after the holiday, so you can, do some more of this kind of work. And Judge Webster does ask about you every now and again.
He followed up. We followed up with each other also. So next time I'm in Durham, I'm gonna connect with you for sure, but also him.
Yeah.
And if we're not able to play golf, we can at least go to the putting green and.
Oh, absolutely. I can get you to the Duke golf. We go play golf on Duke's campus. And I'm gonna tell you something. That's a phenomenal golf space. I mean, it's just absolutely beautiful. They have a putting green and all that kind of stuff. But I mean,
I played there once.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely want to do that.
Absolutely. Well, so it's good to see you. As soon as this video converts, I'll send you a link. And if you want it, we post it, I'll post it. If not, we'll do it over at another time.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Stay safe and be well.